are handed over to the feds. While Paul Manafort was slated to begin his first criminal trial on Wednesday, the former Trump campaign chief just got a one-week delay from the judge today. Now, beginning with Cohen, the political world was, of course, abuzz on Friday over news he secretly taped Donald Trump. Tonight, the news is that tape didn't exist alone. This is a point that several sources made just last week on The Beat. And while this new tape that was discussed last week was not initially given to prosecutors over claims that it was privileged, now Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, says they're waiving any privilege. And the court official who has the final call is saying these other 12 audio items are not privileged either. So they have been released to prosecutors. Those, of course, are the people who can decide whether to charge Cohen with any crimes in this whole case. Cohen's adversary, Michael Avenatti, says Trump is on more than one of these other tapes.
First of all, this is not the only tape. I can tell you that for a fact. There's multiple tapes.
You don't know that there are more tapes of President Trump, though.
No, I do know there's more tapes of President Trump. There's multiple tapes of President Trump.
Now, there's much speculation about who is leaking these Cohen tapes, who benefits from all this, and whether it's another Trump-land distraction from stories that could be even worse for the president, like the continuing fallout over his embrace of Vladimir Putin last week. It also could distract from the other story I mentioned, this truly historic trial slated to begin this week in Virginia. And today, Paul Manafort appeared before court in a jail uniform as his lawyers did convince the judge they should get one more week to go over a voluminous amount of evidence before this trial begins. Now, this was Manafort's first court appearance since the judge sent him to jail last month.
He came in today wearing a short-sleeved green Alexandria jail jumpsuit. Whether that's going to be the situation during the trial or not, we don't know. I suspect his lawyers will try to get that changed.
Judge also made some news by granting Mueller's request to immunize 5 different people who will testify against Manafort. The witnesses linked to companies that did business with him. The list does not include any famous names or known Trump associates. I'm joined by 2 former federal prosecutors, Mimi Rocah and John Flannery. Sophia Nelson, an attorney and former counsel to the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee. John, looking at the Manafort trial in a minute, we'll get into all of it there. But on Cohen, what do you make of the waiver of privilege and your theory as to why this story's in the news?
Well, I think it's in the news because you have Trump on tape, and as anybody would say, that's the strongest possible evidence if they're making an admission on the tape. And in the particular tape we looked at last week, there certainly was evidence of knowledge by the president of a payoff to the Playboy playmate, Ms. McDougal. And it looked like they were trying to find a way either to reimburse the publishers, the non-publishers, if you will, of her story, or to own it themselves to have even more control over it. And this several months before the end of the election, for no other purpose, apparently, than to keep it out of the election news, if you will. I think that the significance of this tape is that it struck me that Lanny Davis actually gave a sucker punch to Rudy Giuliani. Rudy wanted so badly to speak about this tape, he waived any possible privilege as to it. On the one hand, he said it wasn't secret, then he said it was a professional conversation. By doing that, he may have waived privilege to any tape relating to that kind of communication, which may or may not put him back behind when the publication was denied. That is, when they made the deal with McDougal in August of 2016, and then in September of 2016 in the tape last week, they were talking about how they could perhaps even strengthen their hold on Ms. McDougal disclosing anything further.
Yeah, and Mimi, there's a good piece in the New Yorker that sort of goes through why this is a real thing, even when you put aside the questions of how it came out. The new revelation suggests the Trump campaign was lying when it denied Trump had any knowledge of the AMI deal with McDougal. That's what they said then. Cohen also worked on that abortive effort to develop a Trump Tower in Moscow, pushed a proposed peace deal for Ukraine, and also is tied up with the financial firm with Vexelberg that hired him as a consultant. The point being, it's easy to forget how many real and potentially legally significant things there are that this tape could provide evidence on.
Yeah, and how much Michael Cohen could testify about, how much information he has. I mean, the tapes are important for sure, but what they really are is a reminder of all the information in Michael Cohen's head, which is, I think, going to be more than on one tape or 12 tapes even. And, you know, Giuliani can try to explain away, the way a defense attorney would at a trial, each individual recording. Well, this shows, you know, they didn't actually pay the money, AMI paid the money, which isn't a defense, but he can try to explain it away. But the fact of the matter is Michael Cohen, if he decides to cooperate, is really going to have a lot of information. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from these recordings.
Sophia?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think a couple things. Look, we've been talking about this for months since the initial FBI raid back in March or April, I guess it was. And what this shows is that Michael Cohen knew a day was going to come, Ari, where he was going to have to protect himself. The president's tweet seemed to be at odds with his own attorney, Rudy Giuliani, waiving the privilege when the president is on Twitter complaining that this isn't fair. What about attorney-client privilege? So I'm confused as to what's happening in the Trump camp. But I think I agree with both of my colleagues here that the big news is that Michael Cohen has a whole lot of information, and he's got 12 tapes that at some point I assume we're going to hear as the public. And it goes back to what I said a long time ago about having that CYA file. And if you're going to do things wrong and you're going to do nefarious activities, which is what they've been doing for a long time, you're going to cover yourself. I also think we need to find out what's in President Trump's tax returns that we still haven't seen yet. I think that's a key here for Mueller and others that are trying to get to the bottom of what really happened here with all of this.
John, is there a legitimate or non-nefarious reason that a lawyer could be making tapes like that?
Non-nefarious. Well, if you're involved in a conspiracy with your counsel, that is, Trump is, and your counsel is making tapes, it's almost kind of a giveaway that you're in nefarious activity. And it may be legal for one consent taping in New York. It's probably not ethical, and it may be corrupt, because if you know you're involved in a crime, then there is no privilege that attaches to it. It strikes me that one of the reasons Cohen may have delayed cooperating, if that's what he's doing, is because maybe they want to have a clear line of what they could use of his confidences and conversations with Trump, rather than risk it being compromised by an assertion of privilege that would take it down. You may recall that before the court decided to screen these documents, there was a screening team that the U.S. Attorney's Office had, and that wasn't sufficient. So they're kind of put on notice they better be careful if they want to use Cohen, if Cohen is really interested in doing this, as Avenatti suggests, and as Lanny Davis suggests by his presence in the team. And so maybe they want to make sure they know the rules before they bring him in and debrief him and have him say anything, whether or not they make a deal with him and are compromised because it's decided that it's privileged.
Mimi, on the Paul Manafort news, it's a huge deal that this trial is moving forward. We haven't had someone at this high level in a presidential campaign tried in the second year of president in office in the modern era. I'd also suggest that there's no last-minute deal, which in all kinds of cases sometimes happens, as you certainly know.